Welcome to the Little Sparks Podcast, your home for all things faith and music. I'm Cecilia.
And I'm Tara.
And we're former college roommates, professional musicians, and co-founders of the Hildegard Collective, a space for Catholic musicians to connect with one another and grow in their faith and profession. This podcast is an outreach of the collective, so if you're interested at all in Catholicism, music, or both, this is the podcast for you. Join us each week as we get real, share stories, and learn from other awesome Catholic musicians. We're all little sparks of God's divine creation, so together, let's ignite the world for Christ. Welcome back to another episode of the Little Sparks Podcast, and today we are super excited for the first in a two-part little mini-series here, where we're going to talk about Halloween and spooky music as Catholics, and next week we'll be talking about All Saints Day, All Souls Day, praying for dead musicians, all that good stuff. But we're really excited to be diving into this topic. And Tara, do you want to talk a little bit about how we ended up arriving at this in the first place?
Well, I have to give a shout out to our good friend, Anna Maria Cardinali, who was actually a guest back on season 3 of the Little Sparks podcast, talking about her incredible book, Music and Meaning in the Mass.
If you haven't read it, we highly recommend it.
Yes, fantastic book. Back a couple of weeks ago, we were running our first annual Keep the Lights On fundraising campaign for the collective. And as part of that, we offered a sort of prize package that was going to be distributed to a randomly selected donor. And one of those prizes was to choose a topic for a podcast episode in this season. And so Anna Maria was our winner, and we love her, we adore her. We're so excited that she won. And so we got in touch with her to ask what she would like us to talk about on the podcast this season. And she was the one who kind of gave us this idea for this 2-part episode that's about spooky music and Halloween and All Saints, All Souls. And she is just such a brilliant, fun, animated person. And so we are very grateful to her for coming up with this amazing topic for this episode. And we can't wait to dive more into it.
Yeah. So, first let's kind of, clear the air with Halloween. I know a lot of people are anti-Halloween these days, but the reality is that Halloween is a very Catholic holiday that has been co-opted by, evil today. But I don't think that means we should entirely give up Halloween, because it's a very important part of the Hallowtide Triduum. I think as Catholics, we're most familiar with the word Triduum in the context of Easter, where we have the Easter Triduum. Well, no, is it the Easter Triduum or is it the Holy Week Triduum? Anyway, it's Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter Vigil, so Holy Saturday. It culminates with the Easter Vigil Mass. And basically the word Triduum means 3 days. So we have another Triduum at the end of, well, I guess would be harvest time in, Europe, the Americas, so forth. And that is end of October into the beginning of November. So October 31st, the date of All Hallows Eve, which has been shortened to Halloween. November 1st is All Saints Day, and November 2nd is All Souls Day. Now, All Saints Day belongs to the Church Triumphant, so all the souls in heaven. All Souls Day belongs to the Church Suffering, so all the souls in purgatory. Halloween is our day as the Church Militant. This is our day to remember the 4 last things of death, judgment, heaven, hell, This is our Memento Mori Day. It is important. And it's important for us to remember, yes, we are going to die someday. This world is not forever. But also, it doesn't have to be this, totally spooky day, because we know that death is not the end. We know that Christ rose from the dead. This is the eve of All Saints Day. We are meant to become saints, and having this day to keep in mind, in the forefront of our minds, the fact that we are going to die someday is important for us, because it makes our own journeys of holiness, of growing in holiness, that much more real and focused and important in front of us, we have to reflect on the fact that we are going to die someday from time to time. Otherwise, we can get really lost in the world and the temporal nature of it, of what it has to offer, and thinking that, I don't know, it can almost trick us into being like, well, this is going to last for a long time. But no, like death comes for us all, you know. So Halloween, All Hallows Eve, is very important. And if we take that out of the equation and only celebrate All Saints Day and All Souls Day, we've lost something really important. So I think Halloween is good for us to still keep as Catholics. That doesn't mean we have to celebrate it exactly how the world celebrates it. Though a fair amount of it is actually harmless, like trick or treating is harmless. You know, like you're not going to go to hell because you went trick or treating with your kids. Um, Dabbling in the occult, on the other hand, that's a no. You know, we
Mm.
we don't want to do that. Um, but you know, trick or treating or like carving pumpkins, that's not going to send you to hell. And in fact, like if you really look at the history of it, there are Catholic origins to both of those practices. A lot of these Halloween practices that we have in America, for instance, like came from Europe and different European countries and how
Mm-hmm.
they celebrated All Hallows Eve. And then it all kind of melted together in the United States as so much else did, you know. Um, so yeah, I think that it's a good thing for us to keep in, and just for the sake of remembering that, you know, we will die someday, but that death is not the end. And it is the eve of All Saints Day, which is our big main feast of the Triduum. And that's also important to remember, that it's the eve of a feast, you know. So like we can celebrate, but we want to celebrate even more on the feast, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So just worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, definitely. And Cecilia, were you allowed to celebrate Halloween growing up? What was your
I was,
experience with
yeah.
that?
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, nothing to do with the occult. My mom was very strict about that. You know, we couldn't dress up as, you know, witches or anything like scary. But I mean, yeah, no, we went trick or treating. I mean, we lived in a very family friendly neighborhood. So trick or treating was not really an issue. You didn't really see much scary stuff in the neighborhood. Um, and we would go out and get all our candy, and we would come back and we would have fun. And then the next day, our homeschool group would have a big All Saints Day party. So
Mm.
there was always that focus of like, this leads into All Saints Day for me growing up. Halloween was the day where we just like dressed up as whatever we wanted to dress up. There are pictures of me in like a really cute Dorothy costume when I was very, very little, or like, you know, me and my friends one year went as a box of crayons, which was pretty fun to make. But then All Saints Day, we would dress up as saints and like, you know, do that all over again. That was a lot of fun. I think honestly, the thing that I liked least about Halloween is that I have an anaphylactic nut allergy. So I would go around
Oh,
getting all this candy, and I would sort through it at the end of the night and only be able to keep about a third of it. It was so sad. So I would always try to trade with my friends and be like, do you want my Reese's so that I can have your chocolate? You
oh,
My
honestly,
friends were pretty
right.
good about it. So they were pretty good about like taking my peanut butter candy and, you know, trading it for like Twizzlers or Jolly Ranchers and stuff like that.
Good, good, good,
Yeah.
good.
What about you? Were you allowed to celebrate Halloween?
Yeah, we were similar to that. Like we were not allowed to like dress up as anything that was dark in any way.
Yeah.
Even I remember there was like probably when I was around middle school age or maybe a little bit younger, there was a real kind of trend of girls getting a friend and dressing up one as an angel and one as a devil.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and that was like off limits for
Yeah,
us because
that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
did dress up actually as a nun one year, which I've seen is like highly controversial. I've seen on social media this year where people are saying like this should not be trivialized. It's not like a costume.
Mm,
Um, and I think maybe there's a point to that, but definitely like when I dressed up as a nun, it was very harmless. Like there was
yeah.
no ill intention behind it. It was not at all to make fun of the vocation. It was like a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
conservative little habit. Like it was not at all. to trivialize that vocation.
Yeah,
Um,
no scandalous nun for you.
Not at all, no. And then in middle school, I actually transferred schools, and the school that I went to celebrated All Saints Day instead of Halloween. And it actually was quite fun. Everybody dressed up as a saint. We had a big full school like presentation talking about all of the saints, including the 3-year-olds who would just get up and say, "I'm Saint Helena" or whatever, all the way
No.
up to then the middle schoolers sometimes would dress as like saint groups and do like a little
Mm.
skit about the story. Like for example, um I had 4 kids in my 8th grade class, and it was 3 girls and a boy. And so we did Fatima. And so we had,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so one of the girls was the Blessed Virgin Mary. The other 2 of us were Lucia and Jacinta, and then the boy was Francisco. And we like wrote this whole little play, and we performed it for the school, and it was really super fun. I have a lot of very fond memories.
I love that.
Yeah. And it was also great because school wide, they would never let 2 people have the same saint. And so,
Oh, wow.
yeah. And so you would like put down your top 3, and they would try to assign you like one that was on your list. But it really encouraged you to learn about new saints and kind of obscure
Yeah, that's
saints.
really nice.
Yeah, it was
You had
really,
some pretty obscure saints then pop up that
yeah,
we wouldn't hear about just
yeah.
because.
It was super interesting. And it was a great way and a really engaging way to learn about saints that you otherwise might totally overlook. Um,
That's so neat. I love that.
yeah. And I think then as I got older, though, my relationship with Halloween changed a little bit. I think like in high school and certainly in college, I really kind of fell into this way of thinking about Halloween as being like an evil day. And it was kind of interesting because I think it was fueled by my own tendency towards anxiety about
Hmm.
the spiritual life in general. And I think I was crippled almost by this awareness that even if it didn't involve me, there were a lot of people around the world who lose their souls on Halloween because of, playing around with things like the occult, and just how tragic that is, really.
Right, 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 right.
I was so affected by that. And it was like, it got to a point where it was nearly crippling. There were like maybe 10 years of my life where I I felt like I was like walking around as a shell of myself on Halloween. I just felt so devastated and depressed every
Hmm.
Halloween. And I was just like, I would just console myself by just saying rosary after rosary after rosary.
Hmm.
And then I think like really in the past couple of years, that has again kind of shifted now more towards what you were talking about, Cecilia, that it is actually an important day to commemorate for us spiritually, to acknowledge our role as the church militant and how we are striving towards heaven and towards this goal of sainthood together. And that a lot of these traditions, while they have since been secularized and co-opted by people who could care less about God and care less about Christianity, the origins of them are actually very good and very important. And there's a place in the church to acknowledge those things and to celebrate those things. As long as you, again, are kind of doing it in a way that's healthy, that's not going to be spiritually damaging to you in any sort of way.
Yeah.
Um, it's not even a neutral thing, it's actually a good thing. And I think it took me a while, like on my journey of my relationship with Halloween, to get to that place where I could
Mhm.
understand that. But it's been really beautiful, and it's been really transformative to kind of release myself of that almost hyper spiritualization
Mhm.
of that day and actually kind of acknowledge it for what it is.
I love that. That's really great. I'm glad that you've been able to like do that, to make that shift.
Yeah.
I was talking with a friend of mine recently in town, and she was saying, like, we were talking about Halloween, and she was saying how a lot of people around where we live, like, do not celebrate Halloween because, they've totally bought into the idea that it's completely co opted by evil and, like, we shouldn't have anything to do with it as Catholics. We were talking about how, like, it's important that we keep, like, this is what Satan wants. He wants us to give up this holiday because he doesn't want us to think about the fact that we're going to die someday. Like, he doesn't want us to, realize our own mortality and to reflect on that. He wants us to stay trapped in the trappings of the world. And so he wants to steal this day away from us so that we won't think about it. But like, we can't abandon this holiday to the wolves. That's just wrong. That's
Mhm.
playing right into Satan's hand. That doesn't mean we have to celebrate it exactly how the rest of the world celebrates it, but we have a responsibility to acknowledge this as a part of the Hallowtide and to celebrate it in some way, some meaningful way that ties in with the rest of the Hallowtide Triduum. So,
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well to think about how Halloween has been co opted by secularism. Because if you think about death through a secular lens, it's terrifying.
oh my
It's
gosh,
got
yeah,
to be like there's literally nothing scarier. And
yeah,
so we have seen this huge influx of like fear based performance surrounding
yeah.
Halloween. And one of my favorite quotes, I don't remember who said it. This was like years and years and years ago that I read this quote, but it was something to the effect of, for Christians, death is not a threat but a promise.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and I love that, and I think that is exactly the right way of thinking about it, where, for all of these hundreds of years of human history, Halloween was a recognition of death, not in fear, not in trembling, but in the promise of what that means for us who, try to live as people of God. But then as we, as a globe, as a society, kind of started falling away from the practice of Christianity and from a relationship with God, that became a terrifying thing. And
Mm,
we see that so reflected in the way that Halloween is celebrated today by the secular media and the secular culture.
that's really, really interesting to think about. But I like that. And you can honestly extend that to other holidays too, just like that secularization of, these different Christian holidays. And it's, yeah, I don't know. But that's a discussion for another day.
Mm,
Um, we said we were going to get into some discussion of spooky music. So let's dive into that because that's one way that, you could celebrate Halloween as a Catholic is listen to some like spooky music.
the first one on our list here, I think, is the perfect one,
Oh,
actually.
yes. Oh, yes. And it's because it's the Dies Irae chant, which has been, it dates back to, the story goes is that it dates back to like the 600s when a dove supposedly appeared to St. Gregory the Great and gave him this chant.
Mm-hmm.
So um, that's not a confirmed story. That's a legend surrounding St. Gregory the Great. I think it's an awesome legend,
It's pretty
personally.
cool.
It's pretty darn cool, the Dies Irae chant being right from God himself. Um, but the Dies Irae chant has been, um, it's been used. Well, it appears always in the Requiem Mass,
Mm-hmm.
in Requiem Mass settings, but it's been used also in classical music and film music to hint at uh, death or risk of death or, something scary happening to the main character. I watched a really interesting video on the history of the Dies Irae. It was about 6 minutes long. So I'm going to link it in the show notes because it's pretty interesting. I did not realize that it is in the Star Wars soundtrack. Like at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the Force theme, I was like, "What? Like this is crazy." But you hear it's right there. Dun
Mm-hmm.
dun dun dun. I guess Rachmaninoff used it in a lot of his music.
Yeah.
He used that theme all over the place. Of course, Hector Berlioz with his Symphonie Fantastique, he used it. I believe it's in the fourth or the fifth movement. But he uses the Dies Irae chant there. Um, Oh, it's in It's a Wonderful Life. That
Yeah.
soundtrack. Did not know that.
It's in it's in Lion King.
It's in The Lion King. Yep. Uh, gosh, there was another one I feel like, and I'm forgetting it. Um, oh, I guess in The Exorcist as well. I have not watched
Yes.
that,
I
but I
haven't
guess
either.
yeah, but it's in that soundtrack as well. So it's used a lot, which I think
Mhm.
is really cool. That this Catholic Gregorian chant has made its way into quote unquote more secular music,
Yeah.
to signify death, or the risk of death, like in the use of it in the Star Wars soundtrack,
Mhm.
'cause we all know Luke Skywalker doesn't die, but he gets into some pretty sticky situations. But I just think it's really cool. So Dies Irae, that's a good one to listen to on All Hallows Eve.
It is, yeah. It's had huge, influence on so many composers throughout history, classical and non-classical alike, because in a kind of similar way to Halloween, the actual chant of the Dies Irae is about the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and
Yeah.
hell. And so it's captivated so many people because of its thematic material, even though it's like a Catholic chant, literally for Requiem Mass, like Mass for the Dead. And a lot of people refer to it, as the Song of Death. And
Hmm.
if you read the translation of the words of the chant, it's pretty intense.
Yes.
I
Oh my
understand
goodness.
I understand why it's captivated so many people in that way, because it's quite dramatic, and I imagine it would be very scary if you were not, believing in God or seeking a relationship with him. Um, but of course, like, we have such a different perspective on it as Catholics, on what all of
Hmm.
that means and references.
Oh yeah.
And it has been really interesting, um, to kind of expand my own understanding of the words of the Dies Irae beyond just, okay, this is like part of the Requiem Mass, but like, no, this has influenced so much of media. It's in Lord of the Rings as well.
Oh my gosh,
And
yes, it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
and how we think about these things in movies and TV, and like, it's really cool. It's really interesting. And so yeah, I think it's the perfect kind of go-to song for embracing the kind of Christian origins of Halloween, because it really does draw you into this reflection on your own mortality. And I think that's what so many of these composers were getting at in their use of this theme, is like, we all gonna die, we're
Yep.
all mortal, we're all we're all temporal beings. And I think that's what this song seems to draw people back to time and time again.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's really neat. It's really neat. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, DSA, top of the list. Another one is Bach's Toccata and Fugue in D minor. I was doing
Classic.
some, oh yeah. I love that one. It's so fun. I was doing a little bit of research into this one as to how it got like the kind of spooky like associations that it has now, because like Bach didn't write it to be spooky, and I didn't like have too much time to research this, so take this with a grain of salt because it comes from Reddit. But according to Reddit, this toccata and fugue was used a lot during the silent film era for spooky scenes.
Mm.
So I thought that was very interesting. Because I remember taking a class in grad school. It was called Seminar in Music Theory, but it ended up being an entire class on film music theory, specifically for romantic movies. But we did a whole section on silent films and the music that was used for silent films, and how there were kind of tropes that developed out of that have remained in film soundtracks ever since, pretty much. So it makes sense if that this is true, that's what happened. It got its kind of spooky associations through the silent film era. that would make a lot of sense why it's stuck around so deeply, because you do hear it in soundtracks still, you heard it over the years, and you continue to hear it, sometimes for like something spooky, so
Hmm.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think when I think of Halloween music and spooky music, this is probably the first thing that comes to my mind
Yeah,
because it's just
100%.
it's just so iconic. It's become so synonymous with like scary
Mhm.
vampires, monsters, supernatural things happening.
Yeah,
Um, and I just wonder how Bach would feel about that.
I know, I would be really interested to know as well, because he was such a devout Christian, um and he loved the Lord so deeply, and I feel like he would either love it or hate it, honestly, that it was associated with spooky things.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how, I don't have
Or
the answer. Like,
view as of, like, the final things and death and all of that. So I
yeah,
don't know.
because I was listening to this recently, kind of in preparation for this episode, and I was trying really hard in my mind to divorce my own associations of this song being creepy and scary and whatever, and just listen to the music.
Mhm.
And first of all, it was kind of difficult to do. But second of all, in my like couple lucid moments where I could kind of achieve that, I kept thinking, this is actually epic. Like I could hear this played like at the end of mass on the organ as people are exiting the church, and it just being like so cool and epic. So
Yeah.
I would imagine Bach being who he was and having the career that he did, that this was probably written for him to play in church on the
Yeah.
church organ. And so how far this melody has come.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what he would think of it. So, yeah,
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
it
Um,
is.
the next one we have on our list here is Schubert's Elkönig.
Which I am not familiar with, to be honest.
Okay,
So
highly
tell me,
recommend.
tell me about this piece.
Yeah, okay, I don't want to spoil it too much because it,
Okay.
it is kind of a story in itself.
Ooh,
So,
okay. I like that.
um,
That's fun.
but the kind of context is that there's a little boy who's very sick, and he's on horseback with his father. His father's carrying him, rushing through the forest to find help for this boy. And meanwhile, the boy is, you could kind of debate this a little bit, but otherwise sort of hallucinating these characters, this character, or perhaps it is Death who he's seeing. You could kind of, there's some discussion to be had there about this vision that this very sick boy is seeing. Um, but it's really interesting. It's written as a leader, so it's like an art song basically. So it's one person singing this song, but he's actually kind of written different voices for the different characters.
Oh,
And
fascinating.
you have the voice of the father who's just fully in reality and understanding the urgency of the situation, and in his paternal voice is kind of trying to comfort his son and get him to, don't die on me, stay with me kind of vibe. Where then you have this little sick boy who's hallucinating something that is horrifying and terrifying and is like out of his mind, not only like with illness, but with fear as well.
Mhm.
And then you have this other character. The name of the aria, El Konik, means elf king.
Oh,
So he's sort of, I don't know, the only thing that comes to my mind is like the elves of Rivendell when I think of this. But I
it's
don't think
probably not the same
I
what
that's
Schubert
the
was going for.
yeah, I don't think that's the imagery he was going for. But it's this creature, this elf king dude, who's then like speaking to this boy in this very creepy sort of voice. Some singers do it really, really well. And kind of saying like, "Oh, give me your hand, little boy, come to me." And like it's crazy.
Gosh,
It's
that's
like,
scary.
so I don't want
Maybe.
to, again, it is kind of like a story in itself. And then there's a narrator as well who kind of sets the scene at the beginning, tells you kind of what's going on. Um, so there are kind of four voices in this song for one person. And it's kind of become common practice in singing this song to have very distinctly different voices for each character, and they make the Elf King really creepy and kind of nasally and like witchy almost.
Ooh.
Um, yeah, and it is fascinating as a piece of music. I remember the first time I was like introduced to this piece just being like, this is crazy. This is so cool.
Insane, yeah.
Yeah, because instead of, having the whole piece be just narrated in the third person by an outside body, you actually have to become all of these different people in the story.
Yeah.
And it is quite like, it's quite unnerving. Like when I heard it for the first time, I was like, "Oh, this is scary. This is kind of spooky." And
Yeah.
he's written it very much to lean into these characters. It's very dramatic. It's a really fascinating piece of music. Definitely. There's I think when you Google it, the first like video that comes up, at least this used to be the case, is like an animation that somebody's made
Ooh.
um of a singer, singing this lead with like, I want to say it's like paper puppets or something. That's what's in
Mhm.
my head anyway, as like displaying kind of what's going on in the story, and it's excellent. It's really well done. Um, so I very much recommend giving that one a listen. It is
Yeah.
fascinating. It's so interesting.
That sounds really cool. I will definitely be listening to it.
I'll send you a link.
Incredible. And of course, we'll link to it in the show notes as well.
Yes.
Moving on. Oh yeah, the tritone, not a song, but it was called the Devil's Chord because it didn't fit harmonically within certain modes of chant, I
Mm.
think. Um,
Honorable mention, the tritone.
yes, honorable mention. Well, it's cool how composers have kind of like today at least, because for a while it was like you don't use the tritone, this is the Devil's Chord. And it was like not allowed, but now, in more recent years, it's cool to see how the tritone has like certain composers have really leaned into that and used it to
Mm-hmm.
kind of highlight, oh, things are not going to go well, like for instance in Maria from West Side Story, the song Maria, Bernstein uses the tritone. And he does it so masterfully that the whole song is just so beautiful, but he's signifying that this relationship is not going to end well, like it's going
Mm-hmm.
to end in tragedy. And I think that's really just so cool how he uses it, and just how
Yeah.
other composers have like kind of done similar things with the tritone, to use it to signify, death or tragedy that will be happening, and
Yeah. Of course, there's like scientifically, acoustically, there's a reason why we don't like that interval. It's uncomfortable to listen to because of the vibration of the sound waves of this interval. We like don't like it. It's not nice. It's not mathematically, equal or whatever as you would expect of like, an octave or something.
yeah.
Um, so there's a scientific explanation for why people have hated this particular interval so much. But I also think, similar to my own kind of journey with Halloween and stuff, I think there was a real problem for a long time in the church and in society with over spiritualization of things that actually
Yeah.
don't have, like, in themselves any type of spiritual significance. This is just a musical interval. That's it. There's
Mhm.
nothing deeper to it. It's just an interval.
Yep. It's
So,
uncomfortable for us. So
yeah,
there's
yeah.
that aspect of it, but that doesn't necessarily make it satanic.
It doesn't make it bad. It's to make it evil. It just makes it
Yeah.
uncomfortable, like dissonance.
Mhm.
But but like that, I'm really glad that there's been kind of a movement to take back the tritone, because I think it's helped normalize that, like, just because something is uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's evil, and we should be very careful when we, attribute things like that to spiritual realities. Calling something the devil's interval doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because it's just a musical interval. And I know, of course, in my own 21st century mind, it's very easy for me to understand that, whereas back hundreds of years ago, it probably was a little bit more difficult. But just worth noting, I think, the tritone has had a very interesting journey in our societal psyche of how it's been, gone from being perceived as something
Yeah.
literally evil that people would actively avoid hearing or listening to or writing in their music, to now it's something that we understand as just what it is, just an interval. And,
And it
you
can be
know,
used, if you use it well, it can be used really
mm,
artistically.
yes.
Yeah. Like Bernstein's Maria.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Interestingly, I feel like for me, modern music, contemporary music, music that's being released these days, does not ever really strike me as scary in terms of its musical qualities and what it possesses musically.
It strikes me as a bit bland. A lot of it,
Well,
like a lot of music that's being released now.
yeah, you could make that argument for sure. But I think when
But
I think of like scary music, I can't really think of any examples that are contemporary. I'm sure there are probably some um, in classical music or like in cinematic orchestration, that because they're written to be that way. But interestingly, I feel like when an artist releases a song nowadays with the intention of it being scary, I feel like they're much more reliant on the lyrics than on the music.
interesting.
I don't know if that's just me, but there are times when I listen to the words of a song and think, ooh, that's scary in terms of what you're saying, in terms of
Yeah.
the
Yeah, yeah,
theme
yeah.
or the subject matter that you're talking about or whatever, the story that you're telling. I can appreciate lyrically that there is such a thing as scary music, but I almost never have any type of scared emotional reaction to the actual music that's being played behind that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I that's just something that intrigued me when I was thinking about this theme for today, because all of the songs that we talked about um, are old. Like they're old pieces of music. And I
Mhm.
was wondering, kept thinking, like, why is that? Why is it that nowadays in our modern society, it feels like there's such a heavy reliance on lyrics to communicate emotion and less on music? Because
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
back in the day, you could make an audience emote so easily with just music, no
Yeah.
lyrics necessary. And I feel like it's still possible, of course, especially if you have a more, classically or musically inclined audience, but it's much harder. And it's not something that's very popular, certainly not in popular music that we'd hear today, on the radio. And
Mhm.
I just kept going back to my thoughts on the tritone as an interval. And I kept thinking, like, in the early 20th century, we had the introduction of 12 tone theory, and this kind of paved the way for atonality. And then that became quite popular amongst contemporary composers throughout the 20th century. And even still today, I've been to a number of contemporary composition recitals of living composers who were there, some my age or younger, when I was in college and stuff. And there was just so much atonality and dissonance in that music. And
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily saying that's 100% always a bad thing. Again, music is just music unless you attribute some sort of spiritual element to it. However, I can't help but thinking now it's been over 100 years since we've started this journey towards the popularization of atonality in music. And I can't help but wonder if that normalization of atonality and dissonance in instrumental music specifically has kind of desensitized us as a society to things sounding scary.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
That's
know
a
that,
really interesting point.
yeah, I don't know that I have the answer to that. I suppose it's more of an
Yeah.
open-ended question, but it was kind of an interesting train of thought for me to kind of go down that rabbit hole and wonder, why is it that I never feel scared anymore by music that's being released? I'm not having that same emotional reaction that I would, even today. I could go turn on, a piece of music from the 18th or 19th century. And I would have a much more visceral, emotive reaction to it than I would
Yeah.
if I turned on something that was contemporary. And I just wonder if that normalization of atonality has like dulled our ears a little bit, and we have like we're less inclined to react that way to contemporary music, or to write that way in
Yeah.
contemporary music.
Well, I know it's in at least a lot of schools, it's not encouraged, like it's encouraged to stick with the atonal stuff and, be modern and contemporary and bold. And I don't know. I feel like it would be good to have some encouragement in other areas of music other than just pushing for one style.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I don't know. I don't know. I think it would be worth a further conversation though on atonality and its like effects that we have seen, maybe. I don't know. It
Yeah,
could be an interesting conversation to have down the road. So,
definitely.
speaking of music, I feel like this is a good time to share what we've been listening to this week. So, do you want me to start or do you want to start or what do you want to do?
I'll start. Sure.
All right.
So, I don't really have much of a backstory to this one other than it's just a piece of music that I discovered um, a couple months back, and I was pretty immediately hooked on it. And I started kind of playing it around the office and just in my day-to-day life because it really just hypes me up and gets me feeling good. And it is the theme song from an old TV show, and I've never actually seen the TV show,
Okay.
but it is the theme song to the TV show Happy Days.
Oh yeah, I've never seen that either. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cool.
And it is so catchy, it's so fun, it's so lighthearted, and I feel like it helps me have a greater perspective on life, especially if I'm having a difficult day, dealing with something difficult at work or difficult at home or what have you. Um, this song just is so uplifting. The words that keep being repeated are "Happy days are yours and mine," and
Mm.
it just reminds me that all of this difficulty and suffering, no matter how great or small, will all pass away, and ultimately there's so much happiness and joy to be found in life, and to just keep that perspective even in the midst of difficulty. And it's honestly such a fun song. I cannot recommend listening to it more. So
Oh, I love that. That's so fun.
yeah, that's my recommendation for the week.
I love that. That is super fun. Um, Mine is a playlist. So basically, the short backstory of this is that I live in Southwest Florida where fall does not exist and you have to make your own.
Mm,
So I will say it has been cooling down a little bit, meaning it is in the low 80s instead of, the high 80s, low 90s. So that feels blissful, honestly, in comparison. And the fall baking bug has bit me, and I've been, I just whipped up a batch the other day of gluten-free apple cider donuts, and they were
yum.
so good. But anyway, there's this playlist put together by it's actually a company called The Village Green, and they do all this. It's like an online marketplace for artisan work, and like the artisans are all vetted by like this like team of people, and it's really they have beautiful products, but they put together playlists for the different seasons and include them in their email newsletters. And there's one from a couple years ago called An Autumn Gone By, and it's all these old jazz standards that have to do with fall, and it's so fun. I've
Yes.
been playing that a lot. Like it starts out with like Autumn in New York and goes on to like Tis Autumn, and like it just goes through all of these like really wonderful just autumn themed jazz standards, and I love it. I love it. I love it. So it's been on repeat around here over the past week or so, and just been super fun. Yeah.
I love that. Why is autumn like such a time for jazz?
I have no idea, but it is such a time for jazz. Like, I never listen to jazz except for in autumn. Like, no joke.
It's great. I love it. I love it. I will definitely be giving that a listen because I love me a bit of jazz year round, but especially in autumn. So,
It's so good. It's so good. All right. Well, with that, I guess we'll wrap it up. And yeah, we will see you guys next time. And God bless.
God bless. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Little Sparks podcast. For more information on this podcast and our ministry, please visit www.thehildegardcollective.com.